So recently, a small plane flew out over a corner of the Amazon that on most maps is just a smudge of green with a river line through it and nothing else. No highways, no grid of farm fields, no little city lights at night, just that endless canopy. Inside the plane, you have a pilot with the kind of memory that comes from years of tracing the same rivers. A couple of indigenous guys who know every bend and sandbar by feel, and a handful of people whose work is strange even to them, flying over a forest to look for people they hope they will never meet. From up there, the jungle is not a wall of leaves. It is a pattern. The forest likes curves. It likes messy edges. When you see a straight line, your stomach tightens. A strip of raw brown where there should be crowns of trees. A rectangle cut like a wound into the canopy. A new path carved into what used to be continuous green. Those are human fingerprints, logging camps, gold pits, airstrips for planes that are not supposed to be here. When you work this job long enough, a pretty view stops being pretty. It is a scan for damage. They had already been in the air for hours when the pilot banked a little and said something low into the headset. Ahead there was a patch of forest that looked wrong in a subtle way. The green was a touch brighter. The treetops dipped in a shallow rectangle. From high up it could have been anything. Storm damage. An old blowdown. The guy with the camera did not think so. He leaned across, pressed the lens to the perspex, and asked for one more pass. The plane dropped lower. The noise in the cabin got louder. The world outside stopped being an abstract carpet and turned into individual crowns and branches. You could see parrots flash out of the way of the shadow. You could pick out different shades of green. And then the canopy opened like a pulled curtain. And there it was, a clearing that did not belong to the world of concrete and wires at all. 4 long houses, big thatched hulls sitting parallel to each other on orange-brown earth. Gardens, green and careful, hugging the edges. Smoke drifting from a fire, people running into the middle of the open space, small from that height but clearly there. Their bodies were bright red from head to toe, hair black and straight. Some had feather ornaments on their arms, and in almost every hand that looked strong enough, there was a bow. In that moment, as the metal bird passed overhead, you could see arms lift. Arrows pointed straight up at the plane. Nobody on the ground waved. There was no curious hand up to shield eyes, no hey look gesture. The posture was tight and deliberate. Spread out a little so you are not an easy line, stand where you can be seen, draw back, and let whoever is up there know that you are not asleep. Inside the plane there was the clatter of shutters, a few seconds of video being captured, and then the pilot did exactly what everyone in that kind of work has been taught to do. He kept going. No circling back to get a better shot, no dropping notes or presents. One pass, then gone. Because as dramatic as that scene looks, the thing most at risk in that clearing is not the thatch or the bows. It is the lungs. The ground below is the Vale do Javari, the Javari Valley, all the way out in the west of Brazil near the borders with Peru and Colombia. On paper, it is one of the largest indigenous territories in the country, a block of forest so big it has its own weather and its own silence. Inside that line on the map lie thousands of indigenous people from different nations. Some have dealt with the outside world for generations. They have small villages with radios and outboard motors on their canoes, community health posts, kids who speak both their own language and Portuguese. Deep inside the same territory, farther up the smaller rivers and tucked up on the ridges, are other nations that most Brazilians will never see. Some have had violent encounters in the past and pulled back into the forest. Some have managed to stay far enough away that their only contact with national society is that roar in the sky or a glimpse of a distant boat. When people outside talk about uncontacted tribes, this is who they mean. Not people who are unaware the rest of humanity exists, but people who have looked at what contact has done to others and decided that the safest move is to avoid it entirely. The strange part is how recently that decision started being respected. For most of the 20th century, the official plan from governments and missions was that everyone had to be brought in. The word they liked to use was pacify, as if people living their own way in the forest were a problem to be solved. So they sent expeditions up rivers with sacks of sugar, machetes, metal pots, and sometimes a Bible. They would build a little base, shout greetings into the forest in a language nobody there spoke, leave gifts, retreat, and come back again and again until someone finally stepped out of the trees. Every time that happened, the same ghost came with it. A virus that was mild for the expedition team would tear through a village that had never seen it before. influenza, measles, things we think of as childhood illnesses, would become events that people still talk about as massacres. You get old photographs and written reports of entire groups dropping from hundreds of people down to a few families within a few years of first contact. Survivors, stunned, end up hanging around the same government outpost that hosted the team that brought in the sickness. The people who did these jobs started to see the pattern in real time. You have field agents who spend months in the forest learning languages, building relationships, finally making contact with a group, and then watch as half of that group dies from something they themselves carried. Some of them turned into critics of the very system that employed them. They started saying, the danger is not their way of life. The danger is us. We are the epidemic. Out of that guilt and that hard math came a different approach. Towards the end of the 20th century, Brazil put into place a formal policy that said in plain language that indigenous peoples who live in voluntary isolation have a right to stay that way. The job of the state, at least on paper, shifted. Instead of sending more attraction expeditions into remote valleys trying to win people over, they created protection fronts. The work was no longer to pull people out of the forest. It was to stand between them and the worst parts of the modern world. That is why the law around the Javari Valley is so strict. Non-indigenous people are forbidden to enter without authorization. That sounds technical, but in practice it means you, with your boat and your curiosity, are not allowed to go in and try to find that clearing. You cannot land a helicopter there because you saw a photograph and think you are meant to bring them medicine or gifts. Missionary groups are banned from making contact whether or not they think they are saving souls. The risk of one breathing body walking into that village, coughing once, and setting off a chain of fevers that ends with a row of graves is too high. How do you protect someone you are not allowed to visit? That is where flights like the one with the red-painted archers come in. The plane is part patrol, part health check at a distance. From above, they can pick out not only clearings like this village, but also other cuts that spell danger. An illegal landing strip is straight and long, with clear space at its ends. Gold mines show up as bright, muddy scars along creeks. Logging camps cluster around roads cut into the forest. When those appear near the known or suspected territory of isolated peoples, that is an alarm bell. It tells the people on the ground where to send patrol boats and which rivers to watch. Back on the forest floor, indigenous organizations in the Javari Valley do their own version of that work. Leaders from contacted groups like the Marubo, Matisse, Matses, and others organize patrols in their own boats. They travel upriver to remote stretches, look for signs of invaders, and keep mental maps of where isolated groups are believed to move. When they find camps of illegal fishermen, loggers, or miners, they document, confront, and pass the information to the state agents whose badges are supposed to mean something. It is dangerous work. People have been threatened and killed doing it. The rivers that carry canoes full of guardians also carry boats loaded with guns and men who see protected land as an obstacle, not a law. If you pull back from this one clearing and look at the whole valley, you start to see this strange constellation of different indigenous realities. One group, like the Karubo, used to be known only as shadows in the forest and sudden attacks with heavy clubs on anyone unlucky enough to stumble close. A part of that people has now been in contact for years. They live in villages along certain rivers, get help from doctors, steal pots and outboard motors, and wrestle with the trade-offs. Another part of the same people still lives deeper inside, choosing the old ways and keeping their distance from posts and clinics. Elsewhere in the Amazon you have the Awa, some of whom are completely nomadic, moving through the forest as small bands, building little palm shelters and then abandoning them a few days later. They carry their world on their backs and in their heads. There are satellite images and camera trap footage that show small figures with bows and children and pets moving through their territory, never stopping long enough for a stranger to catch them. Their relatives who did make contact and now live closer to town sometimes talk about that choice with a kind of grief. They say things like, "We had a good life before we came out. If I meet my uncontacted cousins in the forest, I tell them, stay, do not leave. There is nothing out here for you." And then you have the story of the man people started calling the man of the hole. For at least 2 decades, he lived alone in a small protected patch of forest because everyone else from his group was gone. Ranchers and gunmen had erased his village long before. He refused every attempt at friendly contact. Anyone who got too close saw nothing but glimpses, found nothing but deep, carefully dug holes that he used either as traps or shelters. When he finally died, there was a real argument in Brazil about what should happen to that land. Some said, "There is no one left. Open it up." Others said, "If we are serious about reparations and about protecting the next group, you leave this patch alone as a warning and a memorial." His life turned into a kind of symbol for how thin the line can be between an entire culture and nothing. These stories are not distractions from the people in the red paint. They are the context. The tribe in that clearing is not a curiosity that popped out of nowhere. They are one expression of a larger pattern. Communities that watched what happened on the frontier and decided to step back deeper and draw an invisible border of their own. The state line around the Javari Valley is a second border, this time drawn by outsiders. When those two lines line up, the system works for a while. The forest stays standing, the gardens stay planted, bows stay aimed at birds and monkeys instead of patrol boats. The tension comes whenever someone decides that border is optional. Gold miners bring pumps and mercury and start tearing into stream banks, poisoning water that flows into the hunting grounds of isolated people. Illegal fishing crews run deep into protected lakes to pull out huge fish meant to feed communities for the season. Loggers creep down rivers and test how far they can push heavy machinery before anyone stops them. Drug traffickers carve hidden airstrips and boat routes to move product through a place that has no police station and no reporters within 100 kilometers. Missionaries invent new ways to reach ears they feel entitled to, using drones and solar-powered audio boxes that can play messages in the middle of the forest without any human being present. In all of that noise, one thing stays consistent. The people in the clearing did not ask for any of it. They did not vote in the elections that decide how hard the law is enforced. They do not have a lobbyist in the Capitol. They do not file lawsuits. Their message is the same one you can see in that single frame. We are here, we are armed with what we have, and we are telling you not to come any closer. There is an obvious question everyone has when they see that photograph. Have they really never seen the modern world? They have seen pieces of it. That plane is modern. A chainsaw heard far away is modern. A metal pan found in a river is modern. What they have not seen is the whole machine up close. No supermarket, no concrete blocks stacked into endless walls. No office where you sit all day under artificial light, no industrial accident or factory spill, no prison or highway. To them, those things might as well be myths. Their modern is different. Their modern is dealing with another tribe encroaching on their hunting ground. Their modern is deciding whether to shift camp because the fish moved. Their modern is living in the third or fourth version of a house that has been rebuilt in the same spot by 3 generations. The question behind that question is usually, are they better off this way? That is the part that does not belong to us. We are not qualified to run that comparison. What you can say without guessing is that contact has been catastrophic for a lot of similar communities. They are not wrong to be cautious. When your neighbors come back from the river full of cough and fever after meeting strangers and you bury them one after another, that leaves a mark. When a relative who left the forest comes back years later, thin, tired, and full of stories about hunger in some ugly town on the edge of a highway, that shapes your idea of what lies beyond the trees. The right question for people outside the forest is simpler. Are we willing to let someone else say no to our version of the future? Because that is what this really is. One group of human beings, us, invented states and passports and power grids and the whole structure of the modern economy. Another group, equally human, looked at the results from a distance and said, "We will stay with our gardens, our hunting, our gods, our way of counting time. You can keep the rest." The fact that there is a law now saying that second answer is allowed to stand is new in history. In practical terms, the work that flows from that law is not romantic. It is patrol routes drawn on maps, fuel budgets, court cases, and arguments over satellite images. It is indigenous guys from contacted villages sitting in small wooden boats with old shotguns and cameras, moving up rivers and telling fishermen, "You cannot be here." It is staff at remote posts in the Javari Valley who spend months away from their families checking paperwork and listening to the forest. It is scientists and advocates in cities pushing back when a politician decides that this valley would make a great place for oil exploration or a new highway. Every so often, in the middle of all that, a plane passes over a clearing and catches a glimpse of the people it is all supposed to be about. They run out into the open, draw their bows, and aim up at a noise that means nothing good to them. And then the metal bird is gone again, up into the cloud layer, back toward a world of air-conditioned rooms and microphones and screens where their image will flash for a day and then scroll away. They will not see that part. Tonight, in that clearing, someone will rattle a basket of roasted nuts over a fire. Someone will scrape maniac on a wooden board. Children will lie on their backs in the dirt and point at the stars through the gap in the canopy. Somewhere, an elder will tell a story about a time before this village, or about enemies from the next valley, or about a day when the sky roared and they all stood together and showed it their arrows. If the law keeps doing its job, if the people on the rivers and in the air keep holding the line against greed and carelessness, they will keep doing that for a long time without ever having to see what a supermarket looks like. And the rest of us will live with the knowledge that, in one corner of the map, the most advanced thing we did was finally learn how to leave somebody alone.